heat hits you first. Not warmth. Heat. The kind that climbs from the pavement and sits on your chest. Diesel fumes. Wet asphalt. The sour smell of a city that never sleeps. You are 41 years old. You are Danish. You have a return ticket in your pocket and a family waiting for your call. And you are losing your mind. You don't know it yet. But somewhere between the bus from Ranong and the traffic of Phra Nong, something inside you broke. Something irreversible. How does a healthy man with no history of illness or drugs simply walk out of his own mind in a foreign country? His name was Jakob Jensen. In 6 days, he would be detained. In 7 days, he would be dead in a holding cell, despite dying in the custody of the state. His body would sit in a refrigerated drawer at Chulalongkorn University for the next 60 days, unidentified and unclaimed. This is what really happened. To understand how Jakob Jensen died in a concrete cell, you have to go back to Ranong. It's a quiet province on the southwestern coast of Thailand, right on the Burmese border. For a 41-year-old Dane on holiday, it was the right kind of quiet. On March 21st, 2025, Jakob bought a bus ticket, Ranong to Bangkok. An overnight bus ride thousands of travellers make every month without incident. He boarded that bus a healthy man. He would never get off it the same way again. Imagine the inside of that bus. The vinyl seats are sticky from the humidity. The air conditioning barely fights the heat. The engine vibrates through the floor and into your spine for 16 hours straight. You try to sleep. You can't. By hour 8, your head is full of static. By hour 14, the static has a meaning. What happens inside a healthy brain? No prior illness, no record of psychiatric care that makes it suddenly turn against itself. Doctors call it severe acute psychosis. Sleep deprivation, heat stress, or a virus can trigger it. Sometimes there is no trigger at all. When the bus doors finally open in Bangkok, the city doesn't have a soundtrack. It has a wall of sound. Tuk-tuks, screaming engines, street vendors. For Jakob, it was overwhelming. By the time he reached the intersection, Jakob was no longer looking at the traffic. He was arguing with the air. Every glance from a stranger was a signal. Every laugh was about him. He couldn't tell the difference between the city and the sickness. So, he walked. We don't know exactly where Jakob went over the next 4 days. CCTV trail is fragmented. We know he stopped contacting his family. His phone went silent. His bank cards stopped moving. By the time locals in Phra Nong called the police on March 26th, Jakob had been on the streets for 5 days. He was shirtless and shoeless. His feet were torn. He hadn't eaten. And according to every witness, he was visibly terrified, looking at things nobody else could see. In another country, this is a medical emergency. You call a psychiatric crisis team. But this was Phra Nong, a working-class district where the local police station is a small concrete building tucked between a noodle shop and a 7-Eleven. 2 officers were dispatched. They found Jakob disoriented. He had no answers and no passport. So, they did what police do when they don't know what else to do with a man like him. They drove him 3 minutes down the road and locked him in a holding cell. For his own safety. That's what the report says. It was 9 a.m. on March 26th. Jakob Jensen had less than 13 hours to live. Phra Nong police station, The front room has a long wooden counter, chipped from decades of use. The walls are a pale institutional green, yellowed by cigarette smoke. The air smells of floor cleaner, sweat, and the faint rot of garbage from the alley. Behind the counter, a desk sergeant. Somewhere down a hallway, a phone rings and nobody answers. This is the last building Jakob would ever enter. A holding cell at a Thai precinct is not a jail cell. There is no bed, no toilet, just a concrete floor, a concrete bench, and a drain in the corner. There are no cameras inside the cell. When Jakob was placed inside at 9:30 a.m., there was no continuous record of what happened to him. No video, no audio, just the word of the officers and a logbook entry written in Thai. He was not charged with a crime. The official report stated he was detained for his own safety. But a concrete box is not a hospital. The bars do not lower a fever. The concrete does not quiet a psychotic mind. Locking Jakob in that room didn't treat his condition. It just made him invisible. By 11:30 a.m., the cell is heating up. Bangkok in late March reaches 34 degrees Celsius. Inside a concrete room with no airflow, it's higher. Jakob is sweating, his mouth dry. He has been given no water. By 1 p.m., he is shouting at the walls in Danish and English. The officers can hear him. The desk sergeant writes a note in the logbook, but he doesn't call a doctor. This is the central question. Why did nobody call for help? A man in acute psychosis is a medical patient. The treatment is standard: hydration, medication, observation. The police general hospital was less than 10 kilometers away, but nobody made the call. There is a phrase in Thai bureaucracy, "mai pen rai." It translates to, "it doesn't matter," or "no problem." It usually teaches patience, but here it became the sound of indifference. By 5 p.m., the heat has peaked. Jakob is sitting on a concrete bench. He has gone 5 days without meaningful food or sleep. His movements have stopped. His body has reached its limit. By 7 p.m., the night shift drifts in. The smell of chili and broth from the noodle shop next door drifts into the cell where Jakob is now barely moving. How does a man in clear distress sit unattended for 12 hours while officers 10 feet away eat dinner? It wasn't one person's malice. It was a slow accumulation of small decisions. Nobody locked him in there to die, but nobody did anything to stop it. At some point, we don't know exactly when, because nobody was watching, Jakob Jensen's heart failed. The official autopsy calls it acute cardiac arrest, a clinical phrase that hides the why. At 9:30 p.m., an officer walked past the bars and noticed Jakob wasn't moving. He was already gone. The paramedics arrived, but CPR failed. The body was driven to the morgue. This should have been the moment the family was notified. That call should have happened on the night of March 26th. It wouldn't happen for 60 days. The reason a 41-year-old man with a missing person report already filed could vanish inside a government morgue isn't a story about psychosis. It's a story about paperwork. There is a room at the Faculty of Medicine at Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok where the dead are kept. It is cold, quiet, and smells of formaldehyde. The drawers are brushed steel, each with a small card slot. On March 27th, 2025, one card simply read, "Foreign male, approximately 40 years, unidentified." Jakob Jensen's body would remain in that drawer, untouched and unclaimed, for the next 60 days. 6,000 miles away, Jakob's sister, Anne, was making phone calls. By March 27th, the morning after his death, she had already opened a missing persons file with the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The report had everything: his name, passport number, and a recent photograph. It was forwarded to the embassy in Bangkok, then to the Thai authorities. Somewhere in a database, Jakob Jensen's face existed. In another database, in the same city, his unidentified body existed. For 60 days, nobody connected them. When a person dies in custody, fingerprints are taken. Jakob's were taken on March 27th, but the card was filed, not scanned. It wasn't cross-referenced against missing persons reports or sent to Interpol. It was placed in a folder, in a cabinet, just a few kilometers away from the offices where the search for him was being coordinated. The documents were in the same city, managed by the same government. Nobody walked the distance to bridge the gap. By mid-April, Anne had flown to Bangkok. She spent weeks walking the streets, showing his photograph to tuk-tuk drivers and hotel clerks. She even visited local police stations, showing the desk sergeants his photo. They shook their heads. They didn't recognize him. But here is the most frustrating part of the trail. The system hadn't just failed Jakob once, it had held him and let him go. Records would later show that before his final arrest in Phra Khanong, Jakob had been picked up by officers from a different precinct. He had even been referred to a psychiatric ward at Somdet Khao Phraya Hospital. He was in the hands of medical professionals. He was a documented patient in a government facility, and yet he was released back onto the streets in the middle of a mental health crisis. Anne continued her search, visiting hospitals and homeless shelters. She gave DNA samples. She imagined he had been trafficked or killed in the jungle. She never imagined the truth, that Jakob was lying in a refrigerated drawer at a university hospital she had already driven past. The discovery didn't come from a sudden moment of bureaucratic efficiency. It came because the family hired a private investigator. It was this investigator who finally forced the connection, linking the unidentified male at Chulalongkorn to the missing person report filed by a desperate sister. On May 22nd, 2025, the phone call finally came. Your brother has been located. He has been deceased for 60 days. He has been in the morgue this entire time. For 2 months, Anne had been searching the city for a living man. For 2 months, his body had been waiting for a name. When the news reached Denmark, the outrage was immediate. The Thai government issued statements of regret and promised internal reviews. But none of that answered the question his sister was now asking. Not how he was lost, how he died. When the body was finally repatriated and the family requested a second autopsy, the bruises on Jakob's skin began to tell a story that the official police reports had left out. The autopsy from the Police General Hospital reached one conclusion: acute heart failure. 3 words: final. In the world of Thai bureaucracy, heart failure is often used as a clinical catch-all. But for a 41-year-old man with no history of cardiac disease, the heart doesn't simply stop without a catalyst. There is always a why. To understand the physical reality of Jakob's final hours, you have to understand what 5 days of acute psychosis does to a human body. When the brain enters a state of total unmediated terror, the nervous system shifts into a permanent fight or flight response. The body begins to redline. Adrenaline and cortisol flood the system, forcing the heart to work at a level it isn't designed to sustain. By the time Jakob was placed in that cell, He had been in this state for over 100 hours, without food, without adequate water, and under the crushing weight of the Bangkok heat. His body was effectively an engine running without oil, pushed to the point of mechanical failure. But when Jakob's body returned to Denmark, his family requested a second examination. They weren't looking for clinical generalizations. They were looking for the external reality of that concrete box. Danish forensic pathologists produced a report that was harder to reconcile with the official Thai version. There were bruises, marks on his torso, his upper arms, and around his wrists. In forensic science, the location of a bruise is often more important than its size. The marks around Jakob's wrists were consistent with the kind of mechanical pressure left by restraints or heavy-duty zip ties. The bruises on Jakob's body appeared in a specific, repeating pattern. They were consistent with the type of marks left when a person is held firmly against a hard surface. The Thai authorities claimed these injuries came from Jakob's own erratic movements inside the cell. They said he had fought the officers and thrown himself against the bars. But when the Danish examination was completed, the physical evidence left behind became harder to reconcile with a man simply struggling alone in a concrete room. Thailand had no clear answer. They didn't need one. In their eyes, a man with a broken mind had suffered a broken heart. The case was officially closed. The diplomatic fallout was real, but it was managed with the quiet efficiency of international relations. Denmark requested clarification. Thailand responded with regret and internal reviews. No charges were filed. No officers were dismissed. Within months, the story slipped out of the news cycle, replaced by the next headline, the next tragedy. The bus from Ranong still runs. The cell at Phra Kanong is still in use. The morgue still receives bodies. And Jakob Jensen became a case file, a name in a database flagged as a reminder of what happens when systems do not talk to each other. His family buried him in the summer of 2025. His sister later described the weight of knowing her brother was 30 meters away while she searched the city. She said it wasn't anger she felt, but something colder. She had spent months imagining the worst: trafficking, torture, a body lost in the jungle. She hadn't imagined a filing cabinet. She hadn't imagined that the only thing between her and her brother was the failure of one office to send an email to another. This is not just a story about Thailand or police or even mental illness. It is a story about what happens when the systems built to protect a human being stop seeing him as one. When Jakob was wandering the streets, he was a problem to be managed. In the cell, he was a number in a logbook. In the morgue, he was a foreign male. He was never a man whose family was 30 meters away, waiting for a phone call that would take 60 days to arrive.